Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again, this time going back 40 years, almost to the day, as we cover the Metallica classic, Master of Puppets. I knew it was only a matter of time, but no better time than present as we celebrate its 40th anniversary. But before we talk all things Metallica, how are you, my friend?
Very good, very good. I'm ready to talk about this album with you. We have done a lot of episodes, and we have only done 2 Metallica albums, and one of them is widely regarded as their worst. So it's nice to get back on the positive side of Metallica again. We talked about Ride the Lightning. Now we're talking about Master of Puppets, and at some point I'm sure we'll talk about Kill 'Em All and Justice for All, and really focus on those first 4 classic albums that I think are very highly revered before people start getting their... I feel like the opinion of Metallica starts splintering with the Black Album, and I think people that were down on the Black Album didn't know what was coming after. Like, they probably would have been happy with it if they knew what was going to come. But that being said, I look forward to this discussion, and I'm glad we were able to schedule it so that it is close to the actual release date from 40 years ago.
You make an assumption that I actually like this album. We'll talk about it in detail, and I'll reveal my thoughts. Surprise, surprise. But that being said, I have a phenomenal story, or what I think is a phenomenal story about something that happened to me today. I haven't told you this. I wanted to save it for the air, but I'm going to save it till the end of the episode. But I'll say it's adjacent to this conversation, so it was quite ironic. But I will definitely share that story at the end of the episode. Before we talk about Metallica, a couple of things that I've been listening to that we either got promos for or stuff that recently came out. First and foremost, the new Sierra album, and I think it's called Sierra. They have a few albums now that features the former clean vocalist from Amaranth before Nils Malin, I guess, took over on for him. This is really one of those bands that I don't feel like people talk much about for some reason. I'm not really sure, but Jakey's vocals are really, really good. He writes a catchy hook. The new album, in case you don't know, is called
Requiem for a Pipe Dream. I was looking at it too.
and so it's 11 tracks, all have their own kind of flair to them. And I'll be the first to admit I don't love every track, but there's a handful of phenomenal tunes on this, and because of the diversity, I recommend checking that out. If fans of Amaranth will certainly enjoy the melodic nature of many of these tracks, but they kind of push some boundaries on this one. So kudos to Jakey and the rest of the guys in that band.
It sounds like you gave him this pet name, like, oh, it's little Jakey and the guys in Sierra.
What I forgot is that Jesper Stromblad from the Halo Effect and formerly of In Flames is in this band. Alex Landenberg on drums, names you've heard of, and they just, again, it's kind of this like blend of melodic metal, alt metal, metal, I don't know what you want to call it, but it's very cool. Just very, very good stuff. The other thing I wanted to mention, and this one was a little less surprising, was In Malice's Wake. They are a band from Australia, and they play a really heavy brand of like death thrash. Very fast, very in your face, arguably very abrasive, but really good stuff. Their new album is called The Profound Darkness. It's due out May 1st, a band to keep an eye on. I'll post one of their singles for everyone this week so they can check that out. If you like your metal heavier and you like bands that lean on the death side, you could do a lot worse than In Malice's Wake. Really cool stuff from them. I think people are going to enjoy that. Also, not yet signed. I'm surprised to say that, but they will not be signed for not much longer.
Yeah, so for you record labels out there listening, why don't you get on the ball and get these guys signed already, for the love of God.
Exactly. What have you been listening to?
I think I can't remember if I remembered to bring this up last week. I don't think that I did, but I did get to listen to the new Temple Balls self-titled album, and in spite of the terrible name, I enjoyed this. I think even more than the last album that they released. I just really thought this was fun, and in a time where I feel like, like upbeat music is needed more than ever, I feel like this really does the job. Like the longest track is 4 minutes and 4 seconds. Everything else is under 4 minutes. It's just like in and out, catchy, melodic, Frontiers style. I can't remember if they're actually on Frontiers. Wouldn't be shocked if they were. But it has a little bit of that, I think, hardcore superstar kind of like, not grunginess, but like, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is. It has a little bit more dirtiness to it than I think like Eclipse or Dynasty, but I enjoyed this album.
Very melodic way, right? Like, wouldn't you agree that, like, even though it's got that sleaze factor to it, it's not.
That's the word I was looking for, sleaze.
Oh, there you go. It's done in a way which is really catchy.
Agreed. And the other album that we received a promo for is from Power Paladin, a band from Iceland, who I'm going to have the pleasure of getting to see live at the Warriors of was it Warriors of Steel? I can't remember. Yeah, Warriors of Steel. I don't know. I get confused. Is it a Manowar song? Is it is it Horses Made of Steel? I don't know. Whatever. They. I guess it won't be too much of a trip for them to just jaunt over from Iceland to Norway, a little flight. As a matter of fact, is a possibility I may run into these guys at the airport because we actually have to connect in Reykjavik. So we'll see. But anyway, they have a new album coming out called Beyond the Reach of Enchantment. And it comes out soon on, I pulled up the date, on March 27th. So it should be out in a couple of weeks. But I thought that this promo was tremendous. The song Glade Lords of Aethel Lauren I posted on social media earlier on our what is it called, Metal Exchanges group page. And definitely got some nice chatter back for posting that. So a lot of people saying that they have really enjoyed the singles more than the band's debut album. I think that it's fair to say that the rest of the album should impress anybody who enjoyed those first two tracks. But I've gone back and listened to it twice now in just a few days, and it's a really good, just straight up fun power metal album. And I think that they fit right in on that Warriors of Steel lineup, and I'm excited to see them, and I'm glad that or at least I'm hoping that most of their set list will take a page out of this album, which will be out for a couple of months by the time the festival rolls around.
I feel like there's a really good chance that happens. I feel like this is one of those bands that they're trying to kind of break through, as it were. They're not on a ton of radars. And if the new album is as good as advertised, I feel like they're going to focus quite a bit of their energy on it so people kind of check out their newest material as their songwriting has matured. I've not yet checked out the album. I'm going to do that this week because I'm actually really excited for it. I know you've been hyping it up a lot, in the private group chat and whatnot.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear what you have to say about it. I think it's just a really fun and enjoyable album, and it's currently sitting within my top 5 albums of the year thus far, although it's not a particularly long list at this point. It's been, I think we were talking earlier, we're 2 months in, and it's been, I would argue, a fairly quiet year so far, or maybe just few and far between as far as like really great albums go. So we'll see. I feel like last year was such a strong year. There's so many heavy hitting albums. So I think this year maybe there'll be more room for bands like, Power Paladin and Vandor, to kind of make their way onto lists if there's not as many, Halloweens and Nightwishes and bands of that caliber releasing albums. So, it should be interesting to see how the rest of the year goes.
Yeah, well, going to be very interesting indeed. I echo the sentiments. I just don't think it's been an exceptional year so far. I'm sure others will disagree, but I'm still waiting for albums that just knock my socks off. Several albums that I liked. Don't get me wrong. Many good albums that have come out, but nothing that I would say is extraordinary or revolutionary or anything like that. So that's all right. We got 10 months to go, so I'm sure there'll be a lot of great material yet to come. Shifting gears, Master of Puppets, Metallica. So, we, like you said, we talked about Ride the Lightning. So we talked about the second full-length Metallica album. And this week we go back to March 3rd, 1986, covering their third studio album. I'm going to table the Saint Anger discussion for the purposes of this podcast because there's just no need to go back there. Listen, this is in many ways the album that puts them on the map. Kill 'Em All comes out and it's like an underground sensation. Ride the Lightning still has some of their most classic tunes. Just by way of reference, because I wanted to just mention this, you had given Ride the Lightning, just for reference, an 8.25. I gave it a 9. I've always said, or at least going into this week, that it's my favorite Metallica album. Very high scores for an all-time classic. This, in many ways, was the next step for the band. Some real epic tunes on this one that are longer, some upgrades in the production, maybe not compared to the Singularity by Bear McCreary's standards, but some really, certainly better production than Ride the Lightning. And metal has now taken over a lot of what's happening in mainstream rock in 1986. And so the time was right for an album like this. It's obviously their classic lineup. I don't have to get into this. If you're listening, you know who it is, but it's James Hetfield on rhythm guitar and vocals, Lars Ulrich on drums, Kirk Hammett on lead guitar, and Cliff Burton on bass and backing vocals. And it's his last album with the band because, as everyone knows, just a mere 6 months or so later, he would pass away in a tragic bus accident in Sweden. So obviously, much to the chagrin of the metal community and Metallica, this was the last time that Cliff Burton would be featured in a studio setting with the band. Do you have a memory of when you first heard this album, or when you first heard it in comparison to those other first 4 Metallica albums? I know that you would probably hear songs like Enter Sandman on the radio in the 90s and things like that. But in terms of just like a full-length release, when did you first check out Master of Puppets?
I probably mentioned this before, but my first 2 Metallica albums were Kill 'Em All and the Black Album. And at the time, that was their first album and their most recent album. Load had not come out just yet, or was just coming out, and I wasn't aware of it. So I had 3 albums in the middle that I had to catch up with. And I think it wasn't really until college that I listened to more of Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets. I did buy And Justice for All at one point when I was in high school. My history with Metallica is very weird because I remember buying Load shortly after it came out, and then buying Reload, I think, like right when it came out, because by that point I had really gotten bitten by the metal bug. And like those songs from Load and Reload were all over the radio and MTV at the time. So like, even though in retrospect, I think a lot of people kind of have them on the bottom of their lists of favorite Metallica albums, I think there's a lot of good stuff on those albums, and I'm sure we'll get to talking about them at a certain point in time. I wonder if Load and Reload would have done better if they took all the best material from the 2 albums and made one album out of it. But a conversation
that would be
for
an interesting
day.
Bonus episode. I'm going to propose that now. When we cover Load and Reload, we might want to do back-to-back on that. And then as a bonus episode, construct the best playlist or the best track list for, we'll call it Reloaded, and that can be the episode. But just something to think about in the future.
Yeah, that's a cool idea. So, much like Ride the Lightning, there were songs on Master of Puppets that I knew super well, and then there were songs that I didn't know as well. Battery, Master of Puppets, Welcome Home, Damage Incorporated, like those were the songs that I knew super, super well. Some of the other songs I didn't know as well, and so this was a good chance to listen to them some more. I think that some of the things I have to say about this album are probably going to piss off some people. So, it's I don't know. I don't know if we'll get into it, but I mean, I always kind of considered this to be, at least based on like, you know, the reaction to people who are fans, that like this was kind of the great opus of Metallica, but I don't know that I would call it my favorite Metallica album, and I'll leave it at that for now.
I know you're a big fan of Saint Anger. We talked about that. No, I'm just kidding. I'm curious because I feel like this is probably considered their best album by the diehards, and I don't know that I necessarily agree, but I don't know that it's that far off. We'll get into it. But this thing was an absolute monster. It peaked at number 29 on the Billboard charts. It went platinum 8 times over. And I'll just tell you a quick story before we get into it about how I first heard the album, because it is in kind of a weird way. When I first heard this album, I was like neck deep into my fandom of this band. I had gotten Ride the Lightning, I'd gotten Kill 'Em All, I'd gotten the Black Album, and I was totally enamored with Metallica. It was before I had heard a note of a band like Stratovarius or something like that, or a Dream Theater. It was, it's like 1997, and I'm all in on this band right before I started hearing Sabotage and Halloween. And believe it or not, Mike Affronti had said that he used to work out to this album at the gym. And so he loaned me the CD, and then I had somebody else, Justin Ong, burn me the disc. So I literally took Affronti's disc, I gave it to Justin Ong, and said, burn this for me. That's how I first heard the album.
Those are some deep cuts if you went to high school with us.
Yeah, but like I knew you'd appreciate it. But the reality is, I borrowed the disc and had somebody else rip it for me in 1997. And fast forward, I think I wound up buying the album like 2 weeks later, because as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh my God, like this is just, I want this and I want more of it. And then, like I said, a few months later, I hear Black Diamond, and I was off to the races. But I just have such vivid memories of hearing this for the first time. And then at the Metallica show that we saw in 1998, hearing Master of Puppets live was just like, oh my God, like I couldn't, I mean, not that it was surprising that the band was playing the song, but just to hear it in a live setting was like life-changing at your first concert, etc. So really, really fun stuff. And obviously, needless to say, I don't regret buying that album at all or going through the efforts to have it ripped for me, because it was just a seminal album in my metal collection. I'm not saying it's a 10. I'm sure some would argue that. Hint or spoiler, it's not a 10, and I'll get to the reasons why, but I don't know that it's that far off.
Fair enough. I remember, speaking of ripped CDs, I remember when I had my radio show in college, because I didn't actually own copies of Ride the Lightning or Master of Puppets, I had burned copies of them in case like anybody had requested them, or I felt like playing something off of them. So that's I think I told this story before, but when we were in high school, I was like wanting to buy a Metallica album that I didn't have of those three, in between Kill 'Em All and the Black Album, and you actually recommended that I get Injustice for All, and that was the one that I ended up getting. So it should be only a matter of time before we discuss that one. I feel like people generally look at, those like Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, and Injustice for All as kind of like the peak Metallica albums. So that'll be an interesting conversation. But it's funny. I read that this was the last Metallica album to clock in at under 1 hour. So it's been 40 years since Metallica has made a sub 60-minute album, which you could argue is good or bad. I don't know. I was shocked to see that like load clocks in at just under 80 minutes. Like wouldn't fit on one of those old CDRs that only fit 74 minutes or whatever. You wouldn't be able to burn all of load. You'd have to get one of the 80-minute guys. Just crazy. I feel like they got a little bit long-winded maybe in the later years, but this album is pretty to the point. It clocks in at just under 55 minutes, and I don't think there's any like wasted or too much wasted time. It's interesting to me that the first track is very similar constructed as the first track from Ride the Lightning, where you kind of start off with this kind of acoustic intro that leads into like this blistering opening track that just really, I think, sums up what Metallica's all about. And I think that might have been the appeal of this band at the time, because it wasn't just like slap 40 minutes of thrash onto a disc. Like there was layers, and there was acoustics, and there was songs that were more emotional, like Welcome Home, and I feel like there may have been more layers to what Metallica was doing than maybe the other thrash metal bands at the time. I just think that maybe they chose not to carry that into the 90s and beyond, the way that maybe, Megadeth and Anthrax and Slayer may have done a better job at staying the course of what they were doing, whereas Metallica kind of, as much as they eclipsed like probably all three of those bands combined, they really kind of just did what they felt like doing, even if it was, crapped on, to put it frankly, at times. So, they're one of the most fascinating bands just to go over the whole arc of their story. Like, just kind of crazy, like how many twists and turns there are in both, changes in bass players, and as well as just the style of music from album to album, and the production, as we discussed with Saint Anger, had its issues, one might say.
I would say that's accurate. I guess if it isn't broke, don't fix it. But that classical guitar sound before the onslaught that is Battery is just like the best way to open up an album. I mean, I'm not saying it's my favorite opening track ever, but this, if you're listening to Metallica and you want more of those first two albums, this was like a more polished version of Fight Fire with Fire from Ride the Lightning. Maybe one of the most iconic metal intros ever. And then when that riff comes in, that heavy riff comes in, it is like bone crushing in 1986. In many ways, this is like the personification of thrash metal, with just the intricacy of the guitar work and the speed. The verses are in your face. They're fast. They're heavy. The guitar solos are fantastic. And maybe they can't do it live, but Lars Ulrich is on point in the studio, and those drum beats are powerful drum beats. And in many respects, I think the drums on this track make the tune. It's just such an inspired opening track. There's nothing bad I can say about this song. It's a perfect opening tune.
Yeah. Did you happen to know that that they had talked to Geddy Lee about producing this album at one point, and just due to scheduling, it didn't work. Probably part of the issue is that they recorded this in Denmark, which is where Lars was from, because I guess they found that the studio in the US wasn't getting the sound. They really wanted to like show that they had a more mature sound than what they had on the first two albums. And so, Lars took drum lessons, and Kirk Hammett worked with Joe Satriani, and Lars was trying to get Geddy Lee to be a part of it. So like they were definitely, I think they had their their hopes that this was going to be maybe a takeoff, like a real takeoff point for the band. And I think in a lot of ways that it really was, especially because I feel like, this is a time where, hair and glam metal is really taking over the land. And so to have this kind of counterpoint to that, this, metal with balls, I guess, or like, I think it appealed to the non-glam heads, I guess, of the time. But, yeah, outstanding opening track. This Battery's always been one of my favorite Metallica songs, and just, I think just like with Fight Fire with Fire, it's a really great way to start things off. And then much like Ride the Lightning, they follow it up with the title track of the album. And I mean, you have to believe this is the most well-known track from this album, if not from the band at all. I could think of two moments in particular in pop culture that this song makes me think of. There's a scene in the movie Old School with, Luke Wilson and, John, what's his name? Vince Vaughn and Will Ferrell, where, the frat had to essentially kidnap the pledges, and this song just cuts in and all hell breaks loose. And I just will never forget hearing, I forgot who told me this, but, whoever saw the movie in the theaters with Mike, told me that Mike lost his mind when the song started playing, and he was like air drumming in the movie theater. Nothing you wouldn't expect from Mike. And then I think probably in just a more current reference, this song made a very memorable appearance in season 4 of Stranger Things. I won't spoil anything for you because I know you're kind of early on.
I'm on season 5.
Oh, okay. So you've seen this. So you've seen the scene.
I have.
Okay.
I have.
So then,
and I knew it was it. I knew that there were 2 seminal songs from the show. This being one of them. Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill or whatever being the other. But I knew that I just didn't know why. So I went into the show knowing that this song was playing a major role. And then when I saw it, I'm like, oh, this makes all the sense in the world, like for so many different reasons. And I'm not going to spoil it for anybody else, but I'm not sure that I could find a more fitting tune from 1986, because it had to be from 1986. But this basically was like the personification of what it was meant to be in terms of how it was used. So I'll just say that.
I had made a joke when the episode aired that said, like, I can't wait for the Duffer Brothers to not be able to afford the rights to keep using this song, and they have to overdub it with Peace Sells. Because it just reminds me of back in the day when the Sandman was wrestling in ECW and he used to come out to Enter Sandman. They didn't really have permission to use Enter Sandman. So I think that they released like an ECW like soundtrack CD, and I believe they had Motorhead do a cover of Enter Sandman, so they had a version that they could use, which is kind of funny. And I can't say I've ever actually like listened to that. I might need to go back and check that out. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I remember like when this track first kind of brought its attention to me, thinking like, this is an 8.5-minute song, but like when you get to like that 3.5-minute mark, like it goes into that that really like that softer side of Metallica, and then you get some like really good like soloing and stuff. Like the song just kind of stops dead in its tracks, and then it builds back up again to another like blistering end. It's a really, I think, a really good use of 8.5 minutes, unlike in later years where it would sound like they were just kind of repeating themselves for 8 or 9 minutes for like reasons unbeknownst to anyone. This, I think, they judiciously used their time to make a really outstanding start to finish track. I mean, that opening riff, I think, is one of the most iconic riffs in metal and in music, really. It's just an outstanding tune that I think, if you only know like the beginning of it because you only heard some of it in a movie or a TV show, and you don't know that like there's actually a whole epic, second half, go and listen to this. I can't imagine anyone listening to this podcast doesn't know all 8.5 minutes of this song. But it's a classic.
It is an all-time classic. It is so iconic, and I remember the first time I heard it, and I was like, oh my god, because it was just so good from beginning to end. And I love that extended guitar intro. The verses are completely anthemic. The vocals sound great. The chorus is a complete earworm and probably one of the most metal choruses ever. And then again, like to your point, that U-turn that you take about 3.5 minutes in, it almost feels like a different tune entirely. One of Metallica's best bridges of all time with that heavy, chunky riff. And then you go back to the anthemic nature of the song itself. There were times where the band only played half of this song live, and I think that is just such a sacrilege. If you're not going to play the whole thing, don't play the song.
Well, and plus it's like you get a little nap time in the middle there. You go,
it's a little reprieve before
smoke, and it's not a terrible thing. I mean, I agree with you. I would be pissed if they. I remember it was like when Sabotage would play Chance and then they'd end the song before the rounds. And it's like, no, that's the best part of the song. What are you doing?
Yeah, what are you doing? You can't do that. And so I'll just say I think that the solos on the track are also awesome. And in certain ways, it reminds me of like Rust in Peace before Rust in Peace, just because of how like awesome the solos are on this track. Really, there's not much else you can say that hasn't been said. It's just utter perfection. And, I was talking during the Painkiller episode that I thought that Painkiller, the title track, might be the song that defines heavy metal. If you were going to say, play a metal song for somebody, Painkiller might be it. And I stand by that, but I'm not sure that Master of Puppets isn't in the same conversation. Those are two of the most iconic metal songs ever and almost define the genre that they represent.
That's beautifully said, and I think if you know your audience, if you know somebody who's going to appreciate a more layered and longer track, Master of Puppets might be a better choice than Painkiller. If somebody has a short attention span and they want to hear something just blistering in and out, Painkiller might be a better choice. But both really iconic tunes. Interesting that the lyrical theme of the song is actually cocaine addiction. And there's actually a riff that's quoted from Andy Warhol by David Bowie, an homage made by Burton and Hammett, to whom David Bowie was a huge influence. So that's kind of a cool little thing there too. But interesting that it has that addiction is a theme here.
I mean, and it makes sense. I mean, the whole chopping your breakfast on a mirror. I mean, like, it's not. I don't think there's a lot of
subtlety,
nuance here, right? Subtlety, and that's fine. Like, you don't need it to be, but at the same time, they're not just saying, "Oh, the guy's got." I mean, they're doing it in a creative way. I have no issue with it, but it's clear what they're talking about, I think.
And speaking of like substance abuse, the band was well known for being heavy drinkers during this time, but they took the recording of this album very seriously and made a point that they did not drink during any of the recordings of this album. Like they wanted this to be as, I think, clear and coherent as humanly possible. And so if that meant, saving the fun for later in the night when the recordings were done, like that's what they did. And so, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, again, nothing else I think needs to be said here. We move on to the thing that should not be. The unenviable task of having to follow that up. It's a slower, more deliberate tune. And in many ways, at least to me, the intro almost sounds like Alice in Chains before there was an Alice in Chains. It almost has that grungy feel to it. The verses are so different from a lot of what they had been doing to this point as a band. It almost feels like a darker song that you would have found on the Black Album. Like it's almost a precursor to what was going to come later on. And I'll be honest, I never loved this tune. I always thought it was kind of one of the weaker songs on the album, and I still kind of feel that way. Not that it's bad, it's just different. It's not really as thrashy or fast as some of this other stuff. And I'd also say it's a little bit long in the tooth, and I think it's one of the songs that keep it from being a perfect album.
I really struggled with this song. I just think that
really,
I just think that it's repetitive, and I don't feel like it ever really has a hook to it. Like, it just kind of is like this mid-tempo, like, like just repetitive, like moody, slow, like I don't know, like I feel like this is easily my least favorite song on the album. I just found it to be.
All right, so listen, we're not in complete disagreement. There's another one that I don't love on the album, but we agree that this is. I don't think I struggled with it. I just never thought it was a great tune.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. I agree with you. It's a little long for what it is, because I feel like it doesn't really have any like additional layers the way that Master of Puppets does. It's really just the same kind of like riffs and chorus and verse like construction kind of over and over again for 6.5 minutes. I don't know like what this song, if this is considered like an all-time classic by diehards. I just think I think this is one of the least interesting Metallica songs of the early days of the band, in all honesty.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's an argument to be made that if you look at at least the first 3 albums, maybe the first 4, but at least the first 3, it's in the bottom 2 or 3 tracks in total. Like, it's just not great. Thankfully, it's the next track I think is a phenomenal track, and that's Welcome Home Sanitarium. And in many respects, the thing that should not be just is placed between 2 monsters, and that can't help its cause either. But Welcome Home Sanitarium is another all-time classic. I don't know that it ever got the love of the title, like the title track did, but it's not far behind. And I almost forgot how good this song was. Starts off a little slow, almost like a ballad. It's got a little bit of a fade to black feel. Ironically, the 4th track on Ride the Lightning. So again, sticking to that formula in certain respects. The bass is great on this tune. The guitar tone is so melodic, and I think that Hetfield is showing off his vocal diversity on a track like this, because he gets angrier and angrier as the song goes on, and I think that they're a really nice touch. Heavy chorus, very powerful, especially compared to some of the lighter, airier verses on this tune. And I just love how the instrumental section picks up speed. I think the last 3 minutes of this tune are a phenomenal way to end the track.
I think it's interesting that track 4 on 4 albums in a row is Fade to Black, Welcome Home, One, and The Unforgiven. Probably the most emotional track on each of those 4 albums. So clearly there's a pattern forming here, although like I think One turns into a really heavy song later on. But it starts out like, you know, in that kind of almost like sad and bluesy kind of like metal style before it kind of blows up. I feel like Sanitarium, I think it does pick up a bit more towards the end, but I also think that it kind of maintains the same like stride throughout the whole thing. But man, this is definitely one of my favorite songs on the album. Like, it has a real, like, I love that it opens with a guitar solo. Like, so many metal songs, you have to wait until, you know, the second version of the chorus is through before you get to your solo section. But that they open this right up with a really memorable guitar solo before the vocals even kick in. And like you said, like, you know, James kind of starts off being like kind of on the softer side, and it grows with vocal angst as the song continues, and then you get a really like, you know, blistering solo towards the end, like really powerful drums, I think, on this track. I'm gonna go ahead and make this one my song of the week, to be honest with you.
Nice.
I think it's just a really
was that a no-brainer, or was it kind of a late choice?
No, it was a late choice. I had considered Battery. I've considered Master of Puppets. There's songs we've yet to discuss that I thought of too. There's a lot of good tracks on here, I think, that are worthy, but I just think that this one really shows a lot like Master of Puppets does, only maybe in a different order, that there's like, you know, there's a lot more depth with this band than maybe some of the other thrash bands that are breaking through around this time. So yeah, much like Fade to Black was on Ride the Lightning, I feel like Welcome Home Sanitarium kind of serves the same purpose that Fade to Black did. So yeah, why don't we give it a listen? A song that was inspired by One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which I guess based on the title shouldn't be too terribly surprising, but here it is.
They think our heads are in their hands, but violent use brings violent plans. Keep him tight and makes him well. He's getting better, can't you tell? No more can they keep us in. Listen, damn it, we will win. They see it right, they see it well, but they think this saves us from our
Great choice, great song, iconic, memorable tune, and this was another one that when I first heard it, I was like, yeah, this is really good. But as I got older and as I really began to appreciate the album for what it was, I found myself gravitating more and more towards Disposable Heroes. And it's interesting because it's not like one of the most famous songs in the discography. It's not a song they play live all the time. But what it is for me is an 8-minute and 17-second war-themed banger of a tune. And when I say war-themed, that is a common theme for this band, especially on some of those early albums. They really go back to the struggles of war. Obviously, with the One video comes to mind, and obviously For Whom the Bell Tolls comes to mind. This is another one in that vein. I love how it starts with that upbeat, in-your-face riff and those monster drum hits. Some of the bass lines underneath are just absolutely thunderous, and I don't even know that I noticed them before. This was the first time I really noticed how good the bass was on this track. The verses are so melodic and really kind of set the mood for the track. And I love how the vocals during the chorus are just kind of almost matter-of-factly delivered. Like there's no regard for the soldiers that are literally disposable heroes as they go into war and fight the battle. And I always loved the vocal delivery as a result of that, especially when they start saying back to the front, which is like so poignant and such introspective lyrics, especially now, right? I mean, like what a timely tune this is. I think that the lyrical content fits the mood of the song, and for that reason, it's still my favorite song on the album. Master of Puppets, Battery, they're great, but this is just, for some reason, really resonates with me, so I'm going to make it my song of the week. So let's give a listen to Disposable Heroes, and then we can come back and hear your thoughts. That was Disposable Heroes. I would argue one of the most underrated songs in their discography, and just an absolute oral onslaught in many ways. A perfect way to start side 2 of this album. Your thoughts on this track? I don't think we've ever talked about this song.
I think that would be fair to say. This was a song I didn't know as well as I probably should have going into this, and the song definitely made a really positive impression on me. Yet another kind of long tune that I think doesn't overstay its welcome. I think that everything about it is just really, I think, catchy and enjoyable. And like, that's the thing. Like, when we talked about Anthrax's Among the Living album and I had a hard time with it, I think it's because it was lacking, those hooks and those melodies that I think really draw me towards, some of these Metallica songs, a lot of what Megadeth was doing. Like, I love that combination of the thrashy, guitars and the onslaught of drums and combine that with some really strong melodies, which I think the thing that should not be that's what that song was missing. I think, like, it was just a really kind of long but straightforward thrash song that I think for me I needed a little bit more, and I feel like Disposable Heroes really does that for me. I think it's got a catchier chorus. I think it has catchier verses. I think that the soloing is stronger. So I absolutely don't blame you whatsoever to make this your song of the week. Makes total sense, and I agree with you that I think it's kind of an underappreciated song in the library of Metallica songs, which, considering how long the band's been around, they don't have that many songs. When you think about comparing like Megadeth's song library to Metallica's. Megadeth might have twice as many songs as Metallica, just because Metallica so infrequently released albums. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And a lot of these albums weren't chock full of 30 songs. I mean, Load and Reload aside, a lot of these albums only had 8 songs or 10 songs. So good stuff. We move on to the next track, Leper Messiah, penned by Hetfield and Lars Ulrich, who got songwriting credits on all of these songs, sometimes joined by Kirk and Cliff. But this is the other song on the album that I don't think is perfect. It's definitely slightly less than stellar. Slower tune, reminds me a lot of what they would do on And Justice for All. There's a lot of songs in this style on the next album. So much so that I think it could have easily been on And Justice for All. The verses are kind of vanilla. The chorus isn't the most memorable. I like the cadence, but it simply just pales in comparison to the rest of the album. Thing that should not be notwithstanding, right? The best part of the song for me by far is the instrumental section, which ultimately picks up speed, provides a nice contrast, and I actually like the last 2 minutes quite a bit. But, the problem is it took you 5 minutes and 40 seconds to finish the track, so the first 3.5 minutes are a bit of a, all right, let's get there, and then it takes off. So not my favorite track. I think it's not my least favorite track, but it's probably my second least favorite.
Yeah, I think it's mine too, although I do like it quite a bit more than The Thing That Should Not Be. There's kind of a big drop-off for me between second to last and last. This kind of, I don't know Justice as well as the Black Album, admittedly, so to me, like, this song kind of reminded me of like one of the lesser songs from the Black Album, I guess, minus the polish, I guess, like, because the Black Album made a very large jump in production values from 88 to 91. It's a solid tune. I think it's interesting. Dave Mustaine has claimed that he co-wrote the song based on an old song called "The Hills Ran Red." The band has denied that, shockingly, and but stated that there was one section that incorporated his ideas. But that said, Master of Puppets is considered the first Metallica album to not feature any songwriting contributions from Dave. So in a way, I think that kind of makes this a very notable release also. It's kind of like they finally washed off maybe what they considered the stench. I wouldn't call it that. I feel like that's kind of a negative, but like they just washed off that Mustaine influence that I think that they were looking to move past after 2 full-length albums that he wasn't even a part of, that his fingerprints were on. So
yeah, I mean, he was all over those first two. It's so much so that he's still covering the material on the most recent release. So, yeah, that was that is definitely a one way to put it. What did you think of the track itself? Did you like it? Did you think it was, again, I guess you're saying it's your second least favorite track, so I guess you don't love it, but certainly better than the thing that should not be.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's got it's got a okay chorus. I think that the verses are fairly interesting. I think you're right. It gets definitely better towards the end when there's more soloing involved. It's a solid tune. I don't love it either. Like, I'm kind of with you on that.
It's interesting that the band on each of the first 3 albums would put out an instrumental track. Pulling Teeth on the debut, and then I say it's interesting because a lot of thrash bands were not really doing this kind of stuff in 1986, let alone at any time in the 90s or 80s for that matter. And I don't know if it was, like, again, part of the formula. I don't know if it was the production company. I don't know. But between The Call of Cthulhu, Pulling Teeth, Anesthesia, and this, Orion, 3 very different but very noteworthy instrumental tracks on those first 3 releases. This one, it starts with a really pronounced bass sound until the drums join in. And I always thought the cadence on this song was really, really interesting, as it just kind of features that Cliff Burton bass. And then about 4 minutes in, the song just completely takes a right turn and goes in a completely different direction, being more mellow and subdued. It's actually one of my favorite parts on the disc. I think it's just such a great blend of melody and technicality, the second half of this song. And then the last 2 minutes or so, it has this kind of build and finality to it. It's just a really well-constructed song, and you're seeing, I guess, the brilliance of the band and their songwriting on full display here. I don't know that I like this song as much as a kid. I think I actually like it more now, which is pretty telling, because this was a song or an album that I was really into back in the day.
Yeah, this I agree that, like, for me, I think this song gets really interesting about halfway through, and it's kind of funny because, this song was kind of a showcase for Cliff Burton, because he arranged the middle section, which is where you get that moody bass line. But the reason I find that interesting is because you go to the next album and, like, the bass is basically practically muted.
And Cliff isn't on the album.
Well, yeah,
if that's
that do. But there's I don't know if I would call it reggae-ish, or there's just something about that middle section where it's just kind of like this, like, really almost like mellow and chill. Like, there's a kind of a chill vibe to it. It's a really cool thing. I think that it really makes the song stand out. The beginning part is good too. Like, it has that very, very classic, vintage Metallica guitar thrash sound, like, with the drums. But I think that, like, much like, Master of Puppets, as I mentioned before, and even Welcome Home, it's an 8.5 minute song that isn't just the same 2 minutes on repeat 4 times in a row. There's layers to it, and there's more there's more dynamics involved, I think. I wasn't super familiar with this song going in, and I ended up really liking it, and I definitely didn't realize it was instrumental. I kept waiting for, like, the vocals to start, and then next thing I knew, the song was over. So I was like, all right, cool. 2 albums in a row with 2 very long instrumental tunes, but the band chose not to end on the instrumental tune this time around.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. I'm glad you like this one. I wasn't sure if this was going to land for you. I'm glad that it did. But the album doesn't end there. It is bookended with another. You started with Battery and then you end with Damage Incorporated. Can you think of like a more poetic way to bookmark this album? This track is deceiving with the way it starts with those guitar sound effects, because the song itself is just, again, and I've used this word several times, but I think it's on point. This is an onslaught on the senses. Those riffs are so simple but so brutal, and then when you mix in the double bass drums, it's like magical thrash metal. It's almost like genre defining. Verses are heavy, chorus slight let up, not in terms of quality, but just in terms of the onslaught. But the whole song is a face melter. I've always enjoyed the simple bridge before the guitar solo. And I know that you're partial to a particular cover of this song, so I'm going to turn it over to you. But before we end, I do want to say one or two other things about the album in its entirety.
Before I go down that road, I just wanted to see if you knew this very rare bit of trivia that Dave Mustaine actually wrote this song, but the original name was Destruction LLC. And the band cleverly changed it to something that would be not as recognizable with Damage Incorporated. Clearly, I jest.
That's funny.
But to your point, I was introduced to this song thanks to the Dream Theater VHS tape, 5 Years in a Lifetime, which featured some live video from this I think it was called like the Uncovered or something set. And
yeah, I'll give you. So in '95, Dream Theater does a show at Ronnie Scott's Jazz Club over in the UK, and they do an entire set of covers. I actually have the bootleg of it. And it sounds great. Really cool bootleg. If anybody's interested, let me know. I'm happy to share it. But I say that because the covers and the guests that they have is nothing short of spectacular. And as they're doing this cover set, they do a cover that is forever known in Dream Theater circles. You want to tell them what it is?
Sure. Well, it's Damage Incorporated, but James LeBrie took a seat, and who would fill in on vocals, but the great Barney Greenway of Napalm Death fame, and he sang this song with all of the growls you would expect from a Napalm Death song. And I will never forget the first time I heard it, watching it with you and Nick in particular, and Nick made a point to do an impression of Barney Greenway's vocals of Damage Incorporated, and it's forever embedded in my brain. It's one of the funniest things I've ever been able to witness in my life. And at the time, like, I fucking hated death vocals and growls. Like, so like to me, the song was kind of a joke. But like in retrospect, now that I don't really mind the vocals, it's actually a really cool version of the song. Years later, I would actually sit down and listen to the Metallica version of it, and like, you know, the Damage Incorporated part is whispered and not, you know, screamed at with the death of 1,000 ghouls. I don't know how you'd want to describe it, but that long story short, you know, getting to this track, I was very familiar with it, although not so much with the minute and change of the intro part, which I don't think Dream Theater played. I think they went right into the thrashy, you know, intro at about 1:20. I found a list online of somebody ranked every Metallica song ever, like from first to last. I'm trying to think if it might not have included the most recent release 72 Seasons. No, it doesn't, but it's everything up to Hardwired. Damage Incorporated, they ranked as the #1 Metallica song of all time.
Wow. I love the song. I don't know that I would put it at #1, but I do want to make another Dream Theater reference, because you talked about that show over at Ronnie Scott's in '95. This would not be Well, that would not be the last time that Metallica was covered by Dream Theater. In 2002, Dream Theater would actually play the entire album more than once on that tour. At the time, they would, if they ever did 2 nights in a city, they would play a full album the second night in the city. And so I was at a show at the Beacon Theater in New York City in March. They played, I think they did a cover of Rush's 2112, just the grand finale portion. That was sick. Great show. But then I went again the next night, and check out this set by Dream Theater. I want to just go on a tangent here because I believe it has gone down as the longest Dream Theater show of all time. It was 3 hours and 40 minutes. Check this out. The Glass Prison, Strange Deja Vu, Through My Words, and Fatal Tragedy from Scenes from a Memory. Burning My Soul, Another Hand, The Killing Hand, some of the B-sides or some of the more
or as I like to call it,
from the catalog.
The hand duology.
Exactly. Misunderstood, Lie, The Spirit Carries On, Take the Time. That was the first set. Then they played...
Which you got your money's worth on the first set.
Right. I was very happy there. They then played 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence, the entire 42 minutes, disc 2 of 6 Degrees. Then they played all of Master of Puppets, the entire album. And then instead of ending the show, they played Home and Pull Me Under. One of the most incredible Dream Theater shows I've ever seen. They've released Master of Puppets as an official bootleg, but it's just cool that this is, I mean, you want to talk about an iconic metal album, they covered the whole damn thing. So just really, really cool. And I promised a story before we wrapped up this conversation, but I'll tell you a little story. I tried to log into one of my bank accounts today, and I was unable to log in. It said the account had been temporarily suspended, but not for anything, but I think it was like a password issue or a cookie issue on my computer.
Oh, you
and
love
so
cookies.
I call up. I love cookies too, and Barney Greenway sounds like the Cookie Monster, but I digress. Call up this number, and they're asking for a bunch of pedigree information to unlock my account. So I give them all my information, and then the guy says to me, what is your one-word answer to a question or something like that? And I'd be like, I'll be honest, I don't know what the question is, so I don't know how to answer that. And he says, the clue is first concert. I said, oh, Metallica, my first concert. And he says, that was my first concert. And we go on a 5-minute discussion about Metallica. And I tell him I'm recording a podcast tonight on Master of Puppets. And he said, did you hear the new Megadeth album featuring Dave Mustaine and his cover of rock? So for 5 minutes, I am talking to this gentleman in Costa Rica. If you are out there and you're listening to this, I enjoyed our chat earlier today. He saw them for the first time on the Death Magnetic tour when Metallica went to Costa Rica. And I just thought it was so poignant given our discussion now. So I wanted to just shoehorn that in there. I thought it was an interesting discussion that I had with someone halfway around the world.
And did you recover your password?
Yes, I did. And then I was able to log into my bank account. So thank you to the folks at Goldman Sachs. Thank you, gentlemen from Costa Rica. That's my plug for today. Lots to cover here on a relatively short album, under 60 minutes and only 8 songs. You had alluded to the fact earlier that the song, or I should say the score, would surprise people. What is your score for this album?
Oh God, I'm almost dreading saying it out loud, but I mean, I'm just going to be very honest with you. I don't like this album as much as Ride the Lightning. I think Ride the Lightning, for me, there's just more songs that I enjoy. I think that it's a more melodic album, if I'm being honest. So being that I gave Ride the Lightning an 8.25, I'm going to give Master of Puppets an 8. It's an iconic album. I don't have a strong nostalgia towards the album or like really any of the songs from it, and I feel like the thing that should not be kind of drags it down a bit. So yeah, like for me, like I'll be honest, like I was never really a huge Metallica fan. Like I enjoy the band. I think they have a lot of really good songs, but I feel like I'm kind of apologizing. But I mean, to be honest, that's just kind of how I feel about it. I just think that Ride the Lightning, for me, has more songs that get me excited, to be honest.
Ride the Lightning is a better album. I'm sorry. I'm not saying that there's not iconic songs on this album that are 12 out of 10. That's how good some of these songs are. But it's not a perfect album. And if you just take the body of work with Creeping Death and Fight Fire with Fire and Fade to Black, even songs like Trapped Under Ice and the title track, Ride the Lightning, top to bottom, is a better album. And I agree with you. I gave it a 9. I'm not saying this is that far behind because some of these tracks pull it up, just like some of the tracks pull it down. But for me, it's an 8.75. It is an iconic, brilliant album. But I enjoy Ride the Lightning better. I am with you, and I don't think it's crazy that you have it as an 8. I don't think it is a perfect album. I really don't.
Yeah,
but that being said, it's an all-time classic, and it's great, and I can listen to it at any time, and it puts a smile on my face.
I'm just glad that people don't have my address because I don't need the mob with the torches coming to knock down my door. I have, like, if I was ranking this based on like influential whatever, it's a 10. I mean, like, it's one of the most important metal albums ever released. But we've always been pretty upfront about being honest about how we feel, and that's the truth. My real question though is will Ride the Lightning be my highest score for a Metallica album, or your highest score either?
Yes.
We're gonna have to listen to Kill 'Em All and Injustice for All, I think, before we.
And I like those albums, but I think Ride the Lightning was their magnum opus. I'll go to the Matt saying that. But this is fun. We won't wait several years to do another one. And quite frankly, I look forward to all the rest because we got Saint Anger out of the way. So there's that.
Hey, maybe later this year we could do a Load anniversary episode because that album came out in June of '96. So
there you go. Something to look forward to for sure. I just want to mention 2 quick news items before we go. A lot of people have a lot of thoughts on Sebastian Bach replacing Dee Snider in Twisted Sister for several of their upcoming shows. Now, I know a lot of people are panning this. I am really curious to hear it. I'm not saying Sebastian Bach is the same singer he was in 1990. I'm not saying that Twisted Sister is the same without Dee Snider. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just curious, and it would be something that I would go see. I don't know that I go out of my way to see it, but I would go see that. I'm just curious, and I wanted to know your thoughts on this because so many people have a lot of varied opinions, to say the least.
All I have to say is, I want a Bach!
I'll take it.
I mean, it's really just curiosity. Like, I would just be curious as to what that would sound like because I don't know that anyone ever pictured Sebastian Bach singing for Twisted Sister until it actually came up. I honestly thought it was a joke when I first saw it. I was like, nowadays when you scroll through social media, I tend to assume almost everything I read is fake or made up or whatever. So I was like, I had to vet that article, that clickbait article, just to make sure it was legit, and sure enough, it was. So I don't know that I would go see it in concert, but I will definitely be scouring YouTube to see what that sounds like. So hey, whatever. It's the show must go on, right?
That's what they say, and the show is going on for Sabaton as they've announced brand new tour dates. They had a tour scheduled this winter. They had postponed it, and they've now announced the Legends on Tour dates for 2026 here in North America, starting in the metal capital of Canada, Halifax, Nova Scotia, at the Scotiabank Theatre on September 23rd, doing a run of shows in Canada and the U.S., ending in December 12th in Fort Lauderdale. Imagine going from Halifax in September to Fort Lauderdale in December. That is a long run of shows in 2 very, very different places. But Sabaton was a good time.
There might be some climate change from venue to venue, I would say. But I was disappointed to see that they did not reschedule the show they were going to do in Greensboro. So I don't know. I probably am going to pass on this one, but I think I would like to try and get out there to see Frozen Crown open for Camelot on their U.S. tour. I think it would be fun to see Frozen Crown again. Great bunch of people, and I was excited to see that they were added to that tour. I believe it's going to be their very first run of shows in the U.S. I think the Prague Power was their debut, but this is going to be their first like full-on tour. They're going to be going out with Visions of Atlantis as well. It's a really strong package, in my opinion. Not to be left out, the Europeans are getting Exit Eden and Temperance as the openers for Camelot. So I would
not a bad tour.
I wouldn't be sad about seeing either the North American or the European lineup, but we'll have to see. I think the closest show for that tour for me is in Silver Springs, Maryland. And I don't know that I really want to drive to Atlanta a week before I have to drive to Atlanta. So
it's like Groundhog's Day for the metal fans, I guess, at that point. For next week, I wanted to do something a little bit different. So I actually picked an album that I haven't heard before, but I thought it was apropos in many respects. I wanted to stay in 1986, but I wanted to go in a very different direction. And it's funny because you alluded to something in your comments and you didn't realize, but you actually hit the nail on the head. Metal was going in a very different direction at this point. You had bands getting heavier. You had the Venoms of the world out there, the Metallicas going thrash, Slayer, obviously, who we've covered. But then you had the glam bands, and there's a band that I'm not going to say I'm a huge fan of. I know the greatest hits, but it's a band that we've never covered, and they came out with their debut album in 1986, and they were one of the biggest glam bands, hair bands out there, and I'm talking about Poison. The album that came out in May of 1986, so almost 40 years from now, is Look What the Cat Dragged In, their debut album released on Capitol Records. This is going to be interesting because it is the complete antithesis of what we listen to. Certainly an easy listen, but I feel like something that we actually have to cover just to complete the narrative in many respects. How big of a Poison fan are you?
There are some songs I love, and one of them is on this album, so it should be an interesting conversation. I thought for sure you were going to say Rat.
I've thought about picking them. I really did. But Rat had some big albums before 86, and I decided to stay in the same year. Rat is a band that is on my radar. I will choose a Rat album not terribly long from now.
All right, good, because what comes around goes around, from what I understand.
That's what they tell me. This was fun. This is good. We'll stay in 86 next week. Thanks to our Patreon members. Give us a like and a follow. Consider joining the Patreon for some cool bonus episodes and other perks. You can check out our Patreon site for that. The links are below, obviously, so you can check that out. This is good. We are in the throes of it now. The year is moving ahead full steam. I'm looking forward to next week's discussion. It'll be very different than this one, I assure you.
I would imagine, but stay tuned for next week when the Metal Exchange talks dirty to you.